thanks to Sequoia Living and the opportunity to present to all of you today. I've had some great experiences with Sequoia Living over the years, a little bit that I will touch on. And my main goal today is to kind of enlighten everybody about what it takes from a physical perspective to reduce fall risk to the best of our ability. So I'm going to share screen right now, go to a PowerPoint presentation I have whipped together for this particular presentation. And I've titled it, Exercise is Medicine. Balance training reduces falls in older adults. Exercise is medicine is a motto that is promoted by the primary professional organization of kinesiologists, and that is the American College of Sports Medicine. And certainly we know exercise helps things like heart disease and diabetes to be managed and even prevented, but we also need to recognize that falls can be managed and prevented with exercise as well. So no question, exercise is medicine. It's good to see all of you. I'm part of the Department of Kinesiology at the University of San Francisco in my 21st year on faculty there, which is just mind-blowing to me. And here's a picture of me with my mom, who now lives down in Florida. We'll see a little bit of my mom a bit later as well. So I just wanted to say hello and introduce myself to those of you who don't know me. Have had a long history in this area of study. As I said previously, I was on faculty at USF since 2002. I've been working with UCSF Medical Center on older adult exercise programs since 2016. And our big organization, the American College of Sports Medicine, I've been trying to ensure that older adult issues stay at the forefront of what that organization advocates for. And locally in the Bay Area, I've been involved with a program called Always Active, which delivers exercise programs, including fall prevention programming, to literally thousands of older adults. And we started that back in 2007. And one of our flagship sites continues to be Aquatic Park Senior Center, which is run by Sequoia Living. So great to be here. I just want to emphasize that what we're talking about today has been my career passion ever since I was at University of San Francisco or University of Kansas. Probably my first older adult trained participant that I ever worked with was Mrs. Krieger. She was a resident at a CCRC, a continuing care retirement community in Lawrence, Kansas, called Brandon Woods. And I trained her for 12 weeks, and working with somebody like Mrs. Krieger hooked me on working with older adults and recognizing that there's so much life still left to live and so much desire to live and enjoy life, even in somebody's 9th decade of life, which Mrs. Krieger happened to be. So it lit a spark in me. That spark has continued all the way to my work at University of San Francisco. Here's the beautiful campus. Many of you may be familiar with the campus and have come to talks or the Fromm Institute, which is a lifelong learning program based at USF. And it's just been a joy to work there for many years. And here I am out in the community at Aquatic Park Senior Center, working with one of our fall prevention participants, good old Harry, and he is going through a little mobility ladder with me and working on reducing his fall risk through developing better stepping patterns. Clearly, what I do really fills me with joy. I get to work with students at USF. Many of these students have been involved with me at our community-based sites and research looking at older adult exercise programming. Here again, picture of some participants at Aquatic Park with one of my students going through some exercise programming for fall prevention. During COVID, I've been running webinars and exercise sessions on Zoom with many older adults. I've gotten to present with students at conferences. These were students that helped me with the project at UCSF Medical Center. And we presented this poster presentation at a national meeting in Boston back in 2017, just a great experience. Here I am with one of my older adults. We always have this little battle. They don't like it when I make them exercise, but they know it's good for them. And certainly just this is something that is really a joyful experience for me. And we try to promote better understanding of how exercise can reduce fall risk. Back in early 2019, I published my latest article in the Translational Journal of the American College of Sports Medicine. And the data that we collected to show how effective our 12-week program for reducing fall risk happened to be was all collected through our Always Active program, one of the sites, again, being Aquatic Park Senior Center. So it's great to be presenting and connecting with Sequoia Living yet again. So today's objectives, we really want to kind of go through a little bit of a journey together. It's important we recognize why it is that falls are such an issue. Cal noted that it's one of the biggest concerns that we have from a medical community, recognizing that falls can be devastating in lives of older adults. They can affect them emotionally as well as physically. And we want to really get a sense of why that is and how many risks we have out there in the world, because unfortunately, our world is filled with risks that could lead us to falls. And then we have to understand how the body changes as we get older, which unfortunately amplify the likelihood of us sustaining a fall when exposed to those fall risk factors. And then I'm really going to make a push as a kinesiologist, somebody who studies exercise science, to try to position exercise as the cornerstone of everybody's fall risk reduction programs. Whatever you're doing at home, we want to ensure that exercise is a part of your plan. And then we're going to practice some exercise as well. So we'll have some fun with that. I told you I would show you another picture of my mom. Unfortunately, this is a photo of my mom who fractured her wrist about 10 years ago. We were in Florida walking at Disney World, in fact, on a dark evening. And there was a part of the sidewalk that unfortunately was not functioning very well. And she tripped over a brick, fell, and fractured her wrist. And sadly, she is not alone. In fact, about 1/3 of people over the age of 65 fall every year. And now we've got about 60 million people over the age of 65 living in the United States. So that means we have about 20+ million people who are over the age of 65 who fall every year. Unfortunately, some of those falls are injurious too. They lead to injury. In 2018, the last year we have good data, over 3 million older adults were treated in emergency rooms for fall-related injuries, and almost 1 million hospitalizations and tens of billions of dollars in direct medical costs. Sadly, we have well over 500,000 fractures occurring each year. Similar to my mom, the wrist is one area that we tend to fracture. The one we get really worried about are hip fractures. Hip fractures lead to a long period of time of limited mobility, and that's when diabetes, heart disease, pulmonary disease really begin to ramp up, and many people don't last a year. In fact, about 20% of folks who have a hip fracture die within a year, and many of those who do survive never reach that level of function they had prior to their hip fracture. Maybe they go from walking to a cane to a walker to a wheelchair, and maybe go from living independently to living in a skilled nursing facility. So the data is really, really striking. And just to make this a little bit more personal, I'd like Lola to pull up our first poll where we're going to query all of you as to whether you have had a fall that has led to an injury, or whether you know somebody close to you who have had a fall that has led to an injury. So please take a moment and respond to this poll.
So, Dr. Thompson, like your mother, my grandmother also fell, and she was about 94 years old at the time. She lived to 96, and she actually fell while in the hospital. She was transferring from the bed to the commode, the bedside commode, and the wheels weren't locked and they went out from underneath her. And unfortunately, those last 2 years of her life were, she never got her mobility back. And so personally, I'm on the bandwagon that I want to teach as many people as possible what they can do to reduce their fall risk. And so that's why it's so important that we listen to you today, because you are the expert. And we have, let's see, almost everybody has taken the poll. So I'm going to go
All
ahead.
right, let's check out the results.
Yeah. Let's share these results. Okay, so
Okay,
there you go.
43%. So actually, even a larger percentage of people on today's webinar than what we would expect if we looked at people and polled people nationally. Certainly knowing other people that had falls. If you haven't had one, it's likely somebody in your network has. And I'm really grateful that 20% of you haven't had this experience yet, but just recognize it's unfortunately waiting around the corner for you, because we're about to get into some risk factors that relate to fall risk. So thanks for running that poll, Lola, and I will continue on with our Prezi here. Sadly, there are 200 plus risk factors that exist outside of our body and inside of our body that can really increase the likelihood of somebody ending up on the ground. Mary Tinetti, who is a physician at Yale University, she's considered sort of the godmother of fall prevention research. And I guess she had kind of a day with some time on her hands back in 1986 and started to tally all these different risk factors that exist that could lead to falls. And she came up with over 160. And of course, 1986 was before things like our smartphones were invented. So now with all the technological stuff that distracts us, we're over 200 different risk factors that can lead to us falling. Things like bad weather conditions, or San Francisco, as we know, are known for not the best sidewalks. So those outdoor conditions aren't very good and can certainly predispose somebody. Within our own homes or apartments, we may have obstacles, whether it's pet toys or whether it's a nice rug that perhaps we purchased on a trip to Europe years ago, and that rug isn't really fastened well to the floor, or perhaps we don't have the adaptive devices going upstairs or in our bathrooms to help to reduce falls by having something to grab onto. Even poor lighting, whether it's outside or in our own home environments, we might not see that rumple in the carpet or that crack in the sidewalk. So many factors that affect us outside of our own body, and even sometimes the things that we choose to wear. Maybe you're going to the symphony and you're wanting to enjoy time with family. Well, perhaps as you're going to the concession area during the break, high-heeled shoes you might be wearing might not be the best choice to be able to keep you up and mobile when perhaps people are bumping into you going through the lobby of the Davies Symphony Hall. Perhaps you might be wearing a few layers of clothing when you're on Muni or getting on or off a BART train. God forbid if you have to take BART. And you might get it caught on a doorknob, or somebody might be kind of sitting on it, and that can throw you off balance. So many extrinsic factors are out there that can lead to a fall. And I did want to specifically dial in on something that Cal had mentioned earlier, the fact that our home environments are really important to be essentially fall proofed. So the second poll we're going to take right now, Lola, is whether or not you have had your home or apartment evaluated for risk for falls, and if there have been any modifications made to your home. So let's take a moment and do this one.
All right, so we have our viewers taking our poll. And for those of you watching the recording, these are things to make sure you're aware of, that home evaluations are available to you, especially if you're living in a Sequoia Living community. So we want to always keep people as safe as possible in their homes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
very
go
true.
ahead and share the results here.
Okay, only 15% of people have had their home evaluated. So, a couple of things. Organizations like Sequoia Living, if you're living in one of their CCRCs, there are opportunities to have your apartment evaluated by the therapy care team associated with Sequoia. Out in the community in the Bay Area, there are organizations such as Rebuild Together, which is a nonprofit organization that will come in and do home hazard checks and even provide some grant related funding to do things like install grab bars or improve lighting. So there are resources out there. I would strongly recommend people who have not had their home evaluated yet to consider getting in touch with your county. Every county has an area agency on the aging, and your county agency can connect you with some resources in the community that will come in and do home hazard checks. So that's always a really, really good way to go, because that is one piece of the puzzle that we can hopefully take care of to reduce our fall risk to a degree. So thank you very much, Lola, for putting that poll up. And now we have to go to the things that occur inside of our body, because clearly how our body functions is going to have some relation as to whether we're going to be falling or not. There are chronic medical conditions that are highly related to fall risk. Somebody who may have arthritis in a knee or a hip, it can affect the way that person walks, the way that person distributes their weight, which then creates a higher risk of falls. Acute medical conditions, I actually have read a couple of articles recently talking about the sort of cognitive brain fog that is a symptom of COVID-19. And that kind of brain fog is tied to a greater risk for falls. Somebody who is diabetic, perhaps their vision or the sensation in their feet is a little bit impaired, which can lead to falls. So many different things that we might be dealing with as an older adult can definitely impact and increase our risk for falls. Poor vision, poor hearing. Audiology is oftentimes overlooked, but almost as important as poor vision. We might not hear something that's coming at us, so we might not be able to prepare or anticipate a loss of balance if we don't hear well. And also our vestibular system of balance as we move through our environment. Our vestibular system tends to get worse as well. Okay, additionally, medication. Many of us are on medication. It is estimated that the average person over the age of 65 is on 5 different medications, a combination of over-the-counter and or prescription medications. And those medications themselves can lead to a risk for falls. Antihypertensive medication, if you have high blood pressure, that might cause you to get dizzy when you go from sitting to standing. A medication that you might be taking for anxiety can lead to sort of a person not being fully aware of their environment. Medications that we take even for the common cold might make us drowsy and not as aware of our environment as we could be. So having a pharmacist or members of your medical team regularly review the medications that you are taking is always a good idea. It seems to be that people who are over-medicated have a greater risk for falls. So talk to your pharmacist, talk to your medical team, and ensure that on a regular basis, you are just having your medicines evaluated for whether or not they're increasing your fall risk. We call that a brown paper bag checkup. You take a bag with all your medications in it, give it to your pharmacist, and ask that individual to evaluate if you are increasing your risk of falls based on your medicines and your dosages. And oftentimes we might find that your medical team will need to modify your medication regimen in order to make sure that is better in check. Poor nutrition plays a role as well. I'm going to give you the big 3. Obviously, getting enough calories and maintaining a healthy body weight is important, but we want to make sure protein is in good amount in our diet because that helps maintain muscles that can help us resist and recover from trips and stumbles. We also need vitamin D. Vitamin D, which we commonly associate with bone health, also helps us activate our muscles powerfully. So to stop that trip or stumble, we need to move quickly, and vitamin D helps to activate those muscles to do so. And then finally, calcium to build our strong bones. So those are what we consider to be the main three nutrients that really relate to reducing fall risk. And unfortunately, a lot of us just aren't paying enough attention to those three nutrients. So I would highly urge people that live at a Sequoia Living's facility, you can connect with a dietitian, either on staff or who consults with each CCRC. That's a great way to go. And consider those of you outside of Sequoia Living, perhaps try to connect with your primary care physician who may be able to connect you with a registered dietitian. And then finally, the stuff I love, which is our functional level. How strong are we? How mobile are we? How well can we keep our balance? How well do we walk in our environments? Things that we can modify in response to a well-structured exercise program. So that's where we're going today. And I really want to make a push to all of you that we tend to consider things like falls as what happens to our grandmother in the hospital. Maybe only kind of the most frail older adults are at risk, but that is not true at all. There has been some really good research lately, including a huge dissertation that was done up at University of Western Ontario, looking at the prevalence of falls in even older athletes. This photo you see on this slide was taken during the Senior Games 3 years ago in Albuquerque, New Mexico. These two guys were running a race right on the track, obviously highly trained athletes who have worked hard to get to a national competition. And clearly they bumped into each other as they were running, and they both fell down. So we have to recognize that it's not just the really low fitness folks, possibly it's the high fitness folks who are still doing things like hiking on slippery trails, skiing down mountains on skis, running in track meets, playing golf, playing tennis, playing pickleball. The fact is that people who are highly active may be choosing relatively risky activities. And nothing's worse to take somebody down a few notches from being highly fit to perhaps dependent than the effects of a bad acute fall. So please, just because you think that you've got it figured out, recognize that those 200 risk factors are just waiting for you out there somewhere. So let's try to ensure that we're incorporating into everybody's life some activities that are specific to reduce fall risk and improve balance. Okay, so let's talk a bit about what happens in the body that ensures or unfortunately predisposes older adults to be more likely to have a fall. Okay, we have 200 risk factors out there, and we have 3 small fall defense systems in our body, which tend to get worse as we get older. Doesn't matter how fit we are. Vision tends to get worse just as a part of the biological aging process. About a month ago, I met with my optometrist for my yearly optometry appointment, and I was told I've got the start of my first cataract. What a bummer. So I'm 51 years old and I've already got kind of a little evidence of a cataract. And I know over time that's just going to get worse. And poor vision can lead to a risk for a fall. Even just when bright lights get in our eyes at night, it makes it difficult for us to see. It kind of blinds our field of vision because changes in the eye as we get older cause us to have much more difficult time looking at light in a dark environment. That blinded vision can lead us to tripping over a curb or falling down a step or something perhaps even worse. So vision is a big thing that's affected as we get older. Our inner ear, the vestibular system, right? This is what helps us detect whether we're moving forward and backward, side to side, or rotationally. We have these fluid-filled sacs in our inner ears. those unfortunately get less sensitive as we get older. If you ever are chatting with somebody who's older and they're standing, you might even visibly notice that they are showing some postural sway as you talk to them. And you're talking perhaps to a younger person who seems to be very rigid and they don't show that sway. That is evidence that the vestibular system is getting a little bit less sensitive with age. We require a little bit more motion of the head before we make a corrective response. And sadly, this is something that, just like, especially for us guys, the hair on the top of our head tends to fall out as we get older.